All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long, hot day, so we appreciate folks sticking with us. I think this is an important conversation. We were talking a little bit earlier about the prior panel and the notion of access. And so we're really going to get into access in practice and stories of success, stories of opportunity, and almost an invitation to join us. So by introduction, and then we'll each introduce ourselves, I'm Michael Guth, Chief Marketing Officer at Spectrum Reach. Spectrum Reach is the advertising arm of Charter Corporation. Big company, but built on neighborhood by neighborhood by neighborhood. And everything that we do is about building connection with our customers to their consumers. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing for multicultural customers and creating that access to resource, building a sense of community throughout the course of the conversation. Happy to have LaToya with us. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is LaToya Christian, and I'm Executive Director at GroupM, overseeing inclusive strategy and innovation.
Hi, and I'm Greg Edwards, President and CEO of UniWorld Group. Extremely happy to be here today.
Yeah. Greg and I worked together a long time ago, and LaToya and I are new and fast
We're
friends.
new friends, yes.
So look, a lot of this, driving impact, right? Driving impact, what does that actually mean? And sort of, I think we wanted to start with sort of framing the opportunity and framing what's out there. And so LaToya, I think maybe help frame it for us, how we want to sort of think about it.
Yeah, so I'm the data girl, so I'll lay it out. But I mean, I think some of the information that we spoke about in terms of what Spectrum is doing was really dynamic, especially when we look at the small business landscape. So just understanding that exponentially we continue to see double-digit growth year over year, specifically in the US for small business owners, and then knowing that women are outpacing the population as it pertains to opening new businesses and becoming entrepreneurs. And then when we double click into that further, we're looking at it in terms of Black-owned businesses being 20% and then 35% of those being Black women. So just understanding the acceleration of marginalized identities and communities in terms of going out and becoming entrepreneurs, I think is really worthwhile and notable, especially since so much of that growth was ironically taking place during the pandemic years.
Yep.
So it wasn't slowing down, it was actually accelerating, which I think really speaks to the power and the mindset of these communities and these audiences, and just knowing that the motivations for wanting to go out and start their own businesses is really around financial independence, personal freedoms, and really just achieving personal and professional goals that they have for themselves that oftentimes they felt like they could not achieve within corporate organizations, which is another panel for another day, right? Yeah. But I think that that's really notable. And then while there is a lot of motivation and ambition, I think that where Spectrum comes in is really thinking about what are the resources and the capital that are needed to come in and thrive. Because while there is a lot of inspiration and aspiration, these are the communities that are still significantly underfunded and under-resourced and are using their own capital to actually bring their dreams and desires to life in terms of their own entrepreneurial efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just real quick, so Pay It Forward is a program that we've been doing for 3 years. And essentially, the idea was, let's actually do something. We believe this opportunity. Let's actually make it happen. And so every single year, we award 500 to 700 multicultural-owned businesses a grant of $7,500 or $15,000 in media. We create a commercial, and we connect them with an account executive to help them build a media plan. And the idea is to really level the playing field, and the idea that a small business, an entrepreneur is as passionate about their business as anyone is, don't always feel worthy of television, don't understand how to do television. And so we provide a free test. And after that, we provide a 50% off so they can begin to sort of understand what it costs to spend and to invest. At the same time, we provide resources relative to brand positioning, strategic, and it's an incredibly passionate group. And we've seen brand ambassadors, we've seen them become some of our best customers. LaToya, we were talking about female-owned businesses. 60% of our businesses are female-owned. And so you think about 350 female-owned multicultural businesses that are desiring more information, more access, more resources. We have them. And so part of it is how do we fill that up? How do we create more opportunities, more resources, more things, because it's helping drive business in a meaningful way? I know, Greg, I know you've been doing this for quite some time and really trying to educate a lot of your customers about these opportunities, both in the small business and then directly to consumers. What has sort of been the successes for you? What are sort of lessons learned?
So I think our biggest lesson has been this conversation around growth. Most clients that we deal with talk about growth constantly. The reality is most general market growth is pretty stagnant, right? You can only have so many people so many times, and you're not going to get people who made their 3 purchases this month make a 4th. It's not happening. So what we talk to our clients about is growth, but we go a step further to explain to them that growth is through investment. So it's not simply taking money from the community, it's doing things to empower the community. So a lot of our success, one of our clients in particular at Home Depot, started a program called Retool Your School, going in and actually working with HBCUs on providing students with spaces. And the program is tremendously successful. In fact, this is a funny part. 2 years ago, I got called into a meeting with the federal government to talk about the fact that the Retool Your School program had over 10 million votes for people voting for their favorite HBCUs. And what they wanted to know is how we got 10 million people to vote. How do we get people that engaged? And we said it's really easy. They're voting for things that are about their community. And so when we talk to our clients, we make it very clear in the conversation that it's about empowering the community. And the biggest word that we use over and over again is infrastructure. Help these communities build infrastructure, and you will have a loyal customer for the rest of your life.
Yep. Latoya, from your perspective, from a GroupM, and looking at it from a broader framework, how are you framing it for your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So within GroupM, we have a framework that is entitled Responsible Investment Framework. And within that framework, we've made a commitment starting in 2021 in terms of really doubling down in terms of our investment for minority-owned businesses. And we started with Black-owned businesses, and I think that it's fair to say that after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, we knew that there was a definite need specifically within the Black community. So that's where the initial effort came in. And what we asked our clients to do is to provide a minimum threshold of investment, and we were able to have approximately 20 clients publicly come out and say that they were going to go ahead and make that initiative from an investment perspective. And then when you talk about infrastructure, that commitment to investment helps the small minority-owned businesses really be able to go out and create content, making sure that they're reaching the communities that want to engage with their content as well. And so that has been one of the areas that we've really been able to provide access and resources to the community. And then this year we were able to expand that to 5% initiative that is now expanded with Hispanic, LGBTQ, and Asian communities as well. So it's going to continue to grow. We've seen a lot of success. We've had double-digit growth in terms of investment over the last 18 months. And so I think it's really on a positive trajectory.
And as success begets success, right?
Yes.
And so that's how it.
Yeah.
When we launched the program, it was originally launched as a marketing initiative, and the idea was, could we do well by doing good? And I think the sales organization really saw it as a nice thing to do for the local markets, but not as a business imperative. And what we've been able to sort of explain is, by doing this, by engaging in the community, by building those connections, these are better customers. Mm-hmm. The conversion is half the time. The amount is more than what a typical new business client would be. And the loyalty, as you said, is profoundly greater. And so now, every second quarter when we focus on new business, this is a lead program because it's good business. It's the right thing to do. And in all these panels, it's an obvious thing, but we're actually seeing it in practice and looking to sort of expand that sense of community. For Greg, I'm curious, as you think about Home Depot and others, how do you get people and customers and clients to think about this as not a good thing, but a critical to business? It is not a corporate social responsibility, it is a foundational business strategy. And what are the lessons that you've learned?
So our main strategy with our clients has become empathy, right? Ironically, having our clients understand with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd and at that time the pandemic and economic downturn, we call it the crisis. That had never occurred before. We'd never seen those 3 things happen at one time. And what we told our clients is you need to really hone in on the skill of empathy. You have to understand that these marginalized communities are marginalized because of either systemic infrastructure, lack of access, lack of education. Just the lack of just goes on and on and on. So we usually start that process by helping our clients understand just what marginalization means. A lot of times clients can't really grasp the idea that a community may be a perfect community for them if you can only understand what their challenges are. So we focus in on helping our clients understand the challenges. We help them understand what role their brands play. And then we help them understand what infrastructure they can take beyond just the program. Just not marketing to people, but marketing to communities. When you community market, it's a lot different because you're thinking about how you're going to build out relationships. We tell our clients to have relationships, to build relationships in those communities, and to see those relationships endure. You know, we met earlier today on some other stuff, and you know, what did we say? Not just a program, but a sustainable transformation.
Well, that's, you know, it's interesting. When we first did it, we made a commitment, and George Floyd was certainly a catalyst. And the questions that folks asked was, is this a one-time thing, or is this a fundamental commitment? And really what we've seen is a sustainable program, and as it relates to community, the impact we give, look, we've given, in the last 3 years, $45 million worth of media and advertising value. And when you give a small business a big check, you know, like the Publishers Clearinghouse, you give a big check, $15,000, and their tears coming from our account executive, who's actually creating an opportunity and a connection in the marketplace that had not experienced before. We're creating community with like-minded business entrepreneurs who never were too busy to realize that there are other people in similar situations. And so now we're connecting entrepreneurs with other entrepreneurs, and they're creating their own chat groups and their own connections and own support groups because of this. And so you create these sustainable programs, you drive business results, and you create a powerful community, not just within the community itself, not just among the people you're targeting, but within your own employee segment. And so what's holding people up? There's a lot of, in the last couple of years, commitment to resources, but not always the ability to sort of figure out how to distribute those resources. Or is it a will, skill? I mean, LaToya, how are you thinking? I mean, I know it's a tough question, but it's a...
I'm going to give you my honest answer.
Yeah, well...
I mean, I think that in terms of what the barriers are, I would be honest in saying that probably over the last year or so, while 2020 and the implications of 2020 and a lot of the commitments of 2020 were very much out in the forefront, I think that there has been some regression, right? I think for a lot of people, 2020 is in the rearview mirror. And so unless there is actual commitment and purpose, which is what you're talking about in terms of the employee connection with the community, then it is very easy for some of these efforts and initiatives to fall back. I think also as we're starting to, well, I don't know where the recession is, but we keep talking about it. But as some brands and clients start to think about what constraints they might have from an economic perspective, it's often and unfortunately some of these initiatives that are cut and pulled first. Yep. So I think there is a duality of, you know, some of the empathy might have eroded a little bit, to be very honest. And then I also think that there's just a certain level of economic pressure and fear in terms of what is going to be my return today, right, versus having that longevity and that continuity, especially if there are economic headwinds that I perceive coming in the future. And so I think it's a number of things that start to go into people's minds in terms of why that force or why that commitment isn't always seen all the way through. Yeah.
Greg, what do you...
So, I mean, same honest answer. The second most feared job in the world is the job of the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, right? I mean, honestly, it's prompted, you know, outpaced by CMO first. So the reality is that the DEI position in most organizations never had a sustainable strategy, right? They were designed around what was happening at the time. They were designed around meeting an immediate need. Most weren't linked to long-term strategies. They did not have a plan of sustainment in place. And what you said, not only did it change, the people changed. So now the commitment is eroded. Whenever we have substantial movement forward in communities of color, like we've had over the last few years. In fact, you know, this is embarrassing to tell you, but I've been on many panels where people have said that COVID was the best thing that happened to them if they were a marginalized business owner. because they receive support and help and infrastructure that they've never seen before. Following those moments of growth like that, what we tend to have happen is this entire pullback. So the challenge we face now is really not that the funds were not there, it's that they didn't have a long-term strategy, and as a result, the people and the funding have started to dry up. And there was never that sustained long-term commitment. One thing that we worked on, and I want to tell you about this, it's really important. A few years ago when COVID was taking place, we worked for Johnson & Johnson and created a strategy called the Race to Health Equity. And it became a huge strategy for them moving forward. The second pillar in the strategy was that they would make financial infrastructure available to new partnerships. Now that was in the form of clinical testing, it was in the form of product development, in the form of economic empowerment for hospital systems, all these different things that they committed to that to this day are still in place. Yeah. And so once again, the infrastructure commitment was there. Right. And quite frankly, it wasn't just linked to a DEI situation, it was linked to an organizational growth.
Yep.
And so I think that what we're facing right now is that there's a certain wokeness in America that's a challenge. And on top of that, we have the challenge of the fact that a lot of the funds weren't spent. So now people are looking to make up because we may be in a recession, we may not. And they want to pull those dollars back. And so we need infrastructure and sustainability to move forward.
It's interesting, you sort of said two things there. It's a lot of things that resonated, but one of which is, it's great to commit dollars, but that's not a strategy.
Right.
That's the tactic to deliver against that strategy. In the case of J&J, they had a fundamental strategy to sort of help. The other thing we talked about was we need more ideas.
Yeah.
Right, more ways to think about that. And so beyond creating sort of targets and how we think through it, I think the success is not just sort of we wanted to do it, but showing success. And so are there ideas that sort of help drive that success, or are there some things that you saw that at GroupM that have worked?
In terms of driving success of the media inclusion initiative?
You're sort of seeing it, as it's been growing. What have been that idea versus dollar?
Yeah, so for us, one of the things that going back to 2020, and I have to keep referring to it because I think it was a very pivotal moment, we talk about it with our clients in terms of what you will be missing out on should you not show up in this time, in this moment. So you talked a lot about growth, and so we are having conversations around what is your growth strategy. And if you are in a market like the US and you do as a brand or as an organization intend to grow, well then here are the places and spaces and with the communities in which that would actually take place. And oftentimes it is just purely a numeric conversation. Yep. It's like, this is pure numbers. This is the only way you're able to grow. And so when we have conversations like that with the client and really highlight to them what the opportunity is, for most times, I think there are probably very few occasions where the clarity is not there. And so that is actually a refreshing thing in the sense of we're not necessarily having to fight or push to get clients and the companies that we're working with to see. So I would say that for us, it's really helping them understand what the implications are if they do not show up, if they do not put forth a strategy. To your point, investment is not a strategy, so we're very clear on the fact that you need to put something forward that really highlights what your organizational goals and values are, and then investment becomes a tactic and a fuel to get you there. So I would say that those are the areas that have worked for us.
That's great. Great.
There's one other thing I think we have to consider also. I learned this recently. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she was going through a little phase recently, and I kept telling her no, 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 no. So she comes to the kitchen table one morning, sits down and looks at me and says, "You've been saying a lot of no's lately." And I got to tell you, there's got to be a yes in there somewhere. The correlation to that is that we also have incredible amount of compliance and guidelines that prevent us from creating real ideas. When you sit in a marketing meeting and talk about the types of programs you're doing and types of programs you've been a part of, there are 9 people in that room who can tell you every reason why you can't do it. And not only can they tell you the reasons why, they can demonstrate to you why the company doesn't support doing these types of things because of these reasons. Yeah. And as my 9-year-old told me one day, there's got to be a yes in there somewhere. You've got to find out a way to break through and do innovative things that help people. There's no more excuses that from compliance, we can't do this, we can't do this. How would we give the money away? How would we not hold the people we give the money to standards that were unrealistic from day one? So if we want to invest in you with media, we want to say you have to deliver this much back.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic, it's not a long-term strategy, and it does not promote growth. So as my daughter taught me, there's got to be a yes here somewhere.
So you made me smile, because 9-year-olds. But you know, we had a customer who was a recent winner. I think it was actually a wine restaurant, and she came in and we were onboarding, developing a media plan, creating a commercial, and she stopped and she said, "What's the catch? Like there's got to be a reason. What is it that you're doing that I don't understand, that I'm going to get tripped up, right?" And we said, you know, there's no catch. You want to use this commercial? It's your commercial. Anything you want to do. We are providing free advertising to you because we believe once you see the power of television, you're going to want to do more of it. You're going to be hungry. Once you get access to resources, you're going to be our biggest advocate. And if you're not, then we failed in our ability to do service by you. And so all we're asking is to give us a try. There's no catch. The catch is you're going to be a big customer of ours because you're going to love it, not because you have to do it. And that sort of turned it, and it was a really sort of an interesting, but there's that level of suspicion, and sort of that there's a catch here, that there's some requirement at the back end.
Yeah. I think that's historical. I mean,
Yep.
if you think about just, you know, a lot of the challenges that some of these communities have faced,
Yep.
I think that is the initial reaction. So that makes sense.
Well, and now the flip side is every one of these businesses on their social will now share
the
this is
positive
what happened,
experience.
all the positive experiences, things like that. Have either of you found, as part of that, the dollars versus ideas, how to break through that? Are people receptive to the ideas? You know, for example, so for us, we're in 46 markets. We're in 90 markets. We're 46 that we're doing this program. We have relationships already. We have all sort of the arms and legs. So all we need is the dollars and some resources to sort of help create value. How do we sort of break through that? You know, before it goes back too many steps, right? Before there's still this desire. This is not a new idea, right? And so what is that missing link?
I think the challenge that most of these type of endeavors face is the fact that no one's thought about a long-term plan that doesn't require return. So the challenge we always get into is if you invest $1, I expect, $1 back.
Right.
If you think about the strategy differently and say that the reality is that the strategy should include growth, then you are really fueling the growth by saying, what do I need to do with this target to guarantee that they're here later, right? Yeah. So we know that minority and multicultural owned companies are the biggest growers out there, right? Small businesses, restaurants and delivery services, all these different things, cleaning services.
Yep.
And yet the concern is always, if I make this investment, when will I see it back? And where your company's broken through, and where like even our client, the Home Depot, broke through was, one of their strategies was to not ask for return.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to convince. For those of you sitting in the audiences who manage budgets, there's going to be some hard conversations you're going to have with some pretty senior people about why this doesn't pay out today. But the conversation is about long-term growth. It is about going in and saying that in 2 years this will happen. Here's a piece of information was shared with me today that's really important. The continent of Africa, 1.8 billion people, is projected to be 3.2 billion people in the next few years. So if you're doing business today and saying that Africa is not a place for you to do business, you probably long-term have a problem. Now, to get there, you would have to do two things. You'd have to first be present. Secondly, you'd have to build infrastructure. And so on a domestic, on just a U.S. side alone, having people more embrace the idea of long-range business planning and long-term sustainable planning is our challenge. And the reality is we see greater successes when we do that.
Yeah. From your perspective, I think you're right. How, from a GroupM, I guess one of the questions I was sort of thinking about a number of these sessions that I attended last year, and a lot of sort of a call to action, and not as much action I think, as anyone would like to see, and we're certainly proud of what we're doing, but what would you like to see a year from now? What do you think we can do so that we're on a panel here next year and say, something changed. There was something relative to that investment, to idea, to action, to that this is sound business. This is not I have to wait for it. In our case, it broke through for our organization because the customers that were pay it forward winners, again, became bigger customers faster and more loyal. So it became obvious for our organization to want to do more of this because we want bigger, faster, more loyal. That's just sound business. But what do you think we can do in the next year?
I mean, I think we need a few more CMOs with your philosophy, probably. Right. That would be helpful. But I think in terms of, what a year from now looks like, I think it was really interesting in what you said in terms of the client not necessarily saying that, look, I believe in ROI, right? But I think that giving the space for the program to do what it needs to do and to have that longevity over time and allow it to grow at a sustainable rate is something that we don't often get. We're often given one campaign or one initiative, which is often a very short window of time to prove immediate results. And then if it doesn't work, it's cut off. And so I think just having a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more patience and understanding that, especially when you're speaking and engaging with communities that you have not done historically, it will take a little bit more time. There might be a little bit more resistance and trust that needs to be built. There might be a little bit more infrastructure that needs to be built. And all of this takes time to break through. And so just giving the space to do so.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's not just the CMOs that understand growth through marginalized. I think it's also having CEOs who are committed to transformation. And so one of the biggest challenges you would have or anyone else would have is if a CEO change happens or if a CEO doesn't believe, right? Those are major challenges. You take my agency, for instance. It's really easy for us to get behind what we do. We've been doing it for 50 plus years, and my boss is a black woman. So every time I talk about making sure we make investment in communities, she's 100% on board, and I get 2 extra points every time I say making investment in black communities through black women. So it just builds, right? But she gets it because she's from the community. What we need for this change, this transformational change to occur is we need CEOs who also, like the CMOs who are looking for growth, are investing in the communities they serve. That's really important. To be part of something is to be a contributor to it. And so I think where we have to evolve to is that in the boardroom and in the meetings that the CEOs are having, that they're having that. I talked about the Johnson & Johnson program, and at the time, the CEO was a guy named Alex Gorski. And I remember saying to him that one of the things that we had to do when we were talking about the race health equity is we had to commit to making 50% of their director positions and above across the world people of color. And he looked at me and he said, absolutely. There was no debate, there was no discussion. I didn't have to wait for a board meeting. The CEO said, 50% of our employees to make this happen need to be people of color globally. That's a major undertaking. Johnson & Johnson is a major corporation. So you're talking 30,000 jobs.
Yeah.
But they committed to that. And now you look at what they've done, they've transformed the way they go to market to be more inclusive because the people who are going to market are inclusive.
Yeah.
So along with CMOs like yourself who do this incredible program you're doing, it's important that the CEOs embrace it also. And one thing I didn't say earlier that I need to be clear with, the Home Depot program that we do has no measurement on return of investment at all. We don't sit in a room at the end of the year and talk about how many sales we have. There's no sales tracking whatsoever in the program. That's commitment.
So before we wrap it up, any sort of final thoughts that you want to share? I got one I want to say at the end, but I want to make sure anything else that we've missed. Latoya.
I want to thank you for what your company is doing. And if you think about the power of cable and the role it plays in our communities, and you think about the fact that how hard it is for a small business owner to get a leg up, to be recognized, to be seen, to be heard, to be appreciated, and the fact that you walked into an organization and said we would commit to that without any regard to talking about the investment is just phenomenal. So congratulations to you,
Thanks,
especially for
appreciate
that.
Thank you. Well, look, any, I mean, please,
I mean,
top that. That was amazing.
I would just add to that, you know, we have a lot of conversations, especially right now, in terms of purpose-driven marketing and what does that actually mean and what does that entail. And we often have a lot of brands and clients really struggling to figure out what does that look like. And very similar to Greg, I think that it's great what Spectrum did. It was something that was very innate to who you are as an organization, and very, I wouldn't say easy in the sense that it was easy to deploy, but it felt very natural in terms of what resources you were bringing to the table. And so I think if following that as a blueprint in terms of how organizations can actually tap into a purpose, something that is innately valuable for them to offer the community, I think that's where it starts.
No, it's interesting. I would invert it. I think it was natural for the organization to do these types of things, so therefore it became easy.
Yeah.
We were trading in inventory that we have. We were selling media in the way that we have, and so, you know, thank you both. This was amazing. I would invite everybody. Look, we want to play. We want to experiment. We have this incredible community that we are working with right now that are looking for more resources, looking for information, looking for financial knowledge, looking for access to grants, looking for HR and hiring practices, looking for different things. You know, working with agencies and benefiting from the power of agencies to help them think about strategy in different ways. And so, you know, climb aboard. We're welcome to take on more partners. Welcome to sort of figure out how we can expand this in bigger and better ways. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.